Hey guys, here are the knobs that came off an Admiral TV I picked up recently. They're pretty grungy, so I thought I'd take the opportunity to do a little tutorial on cleaning knobs. These are brown plastic. Got a felt backing on them to protect the set from being scratched when the knobs are rotated. Two pieces. And they exhibit a lot of the classic problems you find on old knobs. They've got this white gunk, I've heard referred to as mold, fungus, but what I think it actually is just a natural breaking down of this early type of plastic. And they have brass inserts that I think were clear coated at some point, and that's partially broken down. Brass is corroded in some areas, other parts are still shiny. Well, the first thing I want to do is break these down, get out the felt inserts, and then give these a good soak, probably overnight, in some cleaning solution. I've used a variety of solutions. They all seem to work pretty well. Everything from 409 to Simply Green to some generic orange citrus cleaner. I'll see whatever I've got in my kitchen and go with that. Here are a couple products I've used in the past. They both seem to work equally well. I imagine any commercial grade cleaner degreaser will work just as well. It's kind of strong though, so I cut it 50-50 with water. So I poured some of this glass here and filled the rest with water and plopped the knobs in. I'll resume recording in a bit and you'll see that this gunk will start to separate and float away on its own. No scrubbing required. Now this white stuff will return with time most likely. One trick I heard about and have tried on my Hallicrafters TV was to soak the knobs after they've been cleaned in Armor All overnight. And that seems to have worked pretty well. I just checked on my Hallicrafters. I cleaned it, I think it's been over a year now, and no sign of white junk removing. But no guarantees there. I mean, time will tell. I figured these knobs are let's see, it's about 61 years old, so if it took 61 years for this crud to form in the first place, even if just a good cleaning, it should last a few years at least before it starts coming back. It's only been about 90 minutes and already quite a bit of the crap is falling off these knobs. I don't think I'll have to leave them in here too much longer. Alright, it's been another couple hours or so, and that's plenty of time. As you can see, these are quite clean. There's just a few last bits just clinging on, but just a slight bit of pressure and the crap just comes right off. So I'll run these under some warm water and maybe use a soft brush just to get the last bits off. Alright, I rinsed off and wiped down the knobs and dried them off a bit. One thing you should be aware of is that some of these knobs have a metal insert on the back, but a spring steel to provide pressure against the shaft. You don't want those to sit wet for any length of time because they'll start rusting. So use a hair dryer to dry them out. Don't use it on a real hot settings. You don't want to affect the plastic from too much heat, but you definitely want to get that dried out. These also have, this one has another piece of spring steel, and this one's got a large metal insert. So I'm going to dry all these out thoroughly before I move on. Alright, I've got the knobs thoroughly dried out. Now if you do lose that bit of spring steel, you definitely want to replace it with something. I'm afraid I don't have any great source for a little bit of spring steel. I have tried using bits of copper or aluminum or mild steel, and they don't really hold up as well as that really hard spring steel. So salvage them from another knob maybe, or just get some tin snips and try to cut out a bit of metal from something that's about the right thickness and will hold up well to pressure. But without it, that plastic rubbing against the hard metal shaft, it's going to break down the knob. It may even break the knob from that pressure. So you definitely want to replace it with something sturdy. Now, as for continuing on with the cleaning, for the knobs that are just plastic, I'll use good old Novus number 2, followed by a little spritz from Novus number 1. And for these, well, there's still some old coating on here. We want to get that off. It's probably lacquer. Don't want to use lacquer thinner though, because if we get that or pretty much any kind of solvent on this plastic, it could very well ruin it. So I am just going to use brass polish like Brasso or Noxon, and just keep rubbing this, and eventually it will wear it all off. I've done it before in a couple knobs. It can take a bit of time, but eventually I think it will pay off. I applied the Novus number 2 to both of these knobs and let it dry to a haze, and I've already buffed out the right hand side of this knob, and I think you can see how much shinier it is. I finished buffing off all the Novus number 2. Now I'm going to give them a spritz of Novus number 1, then buff that out, and this will help keep them clean and shiny. So that's those two knobs done. Now on to the ones with brass inserts. I'm going to use some Noxon metal polish and a sponge that's slightly damp. Squirt this onto the sponge and then keep rubbing at this until all that coating disappears. After using the Noxon for a while, I switched over to Simichrome and a soft cloth, and it's starting to look quite good, I think. To get into the nooks and crannies, I used a toothpick and dip that into the Simichrome and then rub it like along in the seam here and around the outer edge, and just keep buffing and buffing. There are some pits in there. There's nothing I can do about that. That's just right into the metal, but certainly a heck of a lot shinier now. And I still have to do this one. But like I said, I think it's worth the effort. Look a lot better on the set like this, that's for sure. Alright, I think the brass is looking pretty good now, so I'll use Novus 2-in-1 again on the plastic portions. Alright, now there's one last thing I want to do, and that is to touch up these numbers. They're recessed in the plastic and they were filled in with some brass paint, which has faded a bit over time, so what I'm doing is rubbing in some of this gold lacquer stick. What you do is you rub it back and forth and it'll kind of start to melt in, so you want to work that in so you fill in all the recesses really well. Then you rub off the excess with a soft cloth very carefully so you don't wipe out the paint. There's the label. Literally called lacquer stick. I got this from a shop that sells bowling supplies, because these are used to fill in engraved names on bowling balls, believe it or not. But I think they carry these at a lot of arts and crafts places too. I've wiped off most of the excess, so I think it's looking pretty good. You need to be really careful when you do it. If you wipe too aggressively, you're just going to wipe out the paint from the depressed areas. Helps a little bit too after you rub it on if you wait a little bit. I think there's some kind of solvent or something in there and it will harden a bit after you apply it. If you do rub out an area, no big deal. Just rub on some more and give it another try. I carefully cleaned off a little bit more of the excess gold lacquer stick, and I think it's looking pretty good now. So how about I pop these back on the set and we take a final look at them. Before I put those knobs back on, I'm going to take a brief attempt to clean up this cabinet a little bit with some Howard's Restore Finish mahogany. Got a nice water stain up here, where somebody probably set a plant or a cup down and dampness got through the finish. And there's some white paint on here, and there's some dings here and there. Now really this set needs to be refinished. There's also some minor veneer damage, at least along the other side. Like down there in the corner. But overall, it's just kind of dirty. A few scratches here and there, and Howard's is pretty good with dealing with that. So I'm going to shake this up a bit and then use some steel wool and go over these damaged areas, then wipe the whole thing down and see how it looks. I spent about 20 minutes going over the top and the area around the screen with that fine steel wool and Howard's. Came out pretty good. Got just about all those latex paint splatters off. There are a couple chips in the clear finish. Those I think I could blend in with some new lacquer. And that stain here is pretty much gone. You can still see a faint outline. Doesn't bother me too much though. It's certainly better than it was. I got that paint off here. Sure, there's still some nicks in the underlying wood, but not much you can do about that. And I briefly went over this area, but to really do this right, I would need to remove this bezel and this control plate here so I can really get in there and work it good. But as I say, it's a lot more presentable now. One last thing I'm going to do is give it a coat of this Howard's Feed and Wax on top. Just, I'm kind of curious to see how nice it might look, and it'll protect it while it sits out here, because I imagine it'll be a few months, if not longer, before I get around to this set. I noticed the control panel was just held on by 4 Phillips screws, so I just popped it off. As you can see, it's just a piece of injected molded clear plastic that was back painted brass, and originally there was a door with a hinge pin down there and up there that would cover up those 4 holes. So that's what I hope to replicate. Originally it had these ribs in it like this, but I think even if I just had a rectangular block of clear plastic that was back painted with the same color, it would look just fine. Certainly better than it looks now. Well, I got it off. I'll use a little Novus number 2 and 1 and clean it up. And now I can use some Howard's around the area here. I waited about 20 minutes, then buffed out the wax as the directions indicated. I then replaced the control panel, put the knobs back on, and while I was at it, I cleaned off the screen bezel with some Novus number 2 and Novus number 1, and I think it all looks pretty darn good. I will get around to restoring this set one of these days, but for now, I hope you found these tips useful and enjoyed this video.